Good evening. How are you? Well, I had a busy day operating as a lawyer, taking a deposition and other things. But I did manage to catch up on the news of two things. One is good news and the other is problematic. One has to do with the January 6th trial in D.C. The other has to do with our Attorney General messing up things that he doesn't understand or chooses not to understand. First of all, in the D.C. case, Judge Chutkin proved herself to be a judge. I often say in cases, is the person who's sitting in the court who's called a judge, is that word a verb or a noun? Well, Judge Chutkin made it pretty clear that in her case, it's a verb. And the verb was to say that if you use inflammatory remarks, I'm going to schedule the trial sooner. I'm going to limit the documents that you can disclose. I'm going to require you to give them back to the lawyers. I'm going to direct that any notes you make are reviewed by counsel. I want you to know that free speech does not encompass what you're doing out there in a campaign. You are a criminal defendant, and that is different, and this case is all that counts to this court. So, campaigning means nothing to the judge's schedule because he is a criminal defendant. This may be the first time, even in these cases, in which someone has spoken directly to Trump. He was not in the room, but to his counsel. And we can wait and see what Trump decides to say over the weekend, whether he ups the ante. But I think Judge Chutkin has shown that her years as a lawyer, both as a public defender and in private practice and as a judge, has given her a set of standards that she's comfortable with. And those in her courtroom will adhere or else. I've only had a small amount of experience with Judge Chutkin, and I found her firm, but I also found her to be listening. And you could say she was listening to Trump when she pushed back a little bit on the prosecution as to how broad they wanted their restriction on Trump to be. So I think this is a very important first engagement, and all bets going forward, and the question on the bets is, will Trump test her again after what she said in court today? What do you think? Will he back down? Will the man from Flushing, Queens, the crooked broker of Manhattan, the failed casino tycoon, the man who associated with mobsters, the person who, in my opinion, he's the one who stole the election in 2016, and he's the one who tried to overthrow our government. Will he back down? And when I use the term back down, it's to back down from what misconduct he's now engaged in. If he had never done this, the judge wouldn't have said what she had to say. Okay, now what's the second thing today? The second thing, they announced in the afternoon that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, was going to make an important announcement. And what he announced was that U.S. Attorney Weiss, who has had the Hunter Biden case, is going to be made a special counsel. And the nice question is, why does he need to be a special counsel? And did Garland inquire about that? Now, I've heard the former prosecutors and others say, oh yeah, and they all talk in terms of how this is bad for Hunter Biden. But let's run this back a little bit. This prosecutor couldn't find anything in the years he had the case. And in the end, I think because of the exhaustion that settles upon the subject of an investigation, they said, okay, we'll make a plea deal. The plea deal involved, well, I guess really two things. I owe money to the IRS, I'll pay it, and I'll plead to a misdemeanor. What would happen in anybody else's case? And that's what's interesting about this. In any other case, usually just paying the amount of money, that would do it. The second thing is Hunter Biden did have a problem with addictive drugs. And he bought a gun while he was addicted. And one of the questions to have the gun issued to him was a questionnaire asking him if he was addicted. He said no. That's it. Would anybody else be prosecuted for that? No, I really don't think so. Not when I was an assistant U.S. attorney. So why was that deal made? I think it was for Weiss to show that he had done something. He hadn't wasted taxpayers' time. The fact that he'd been appointed by the Trump White House and the dog on a leash attorney general that belonged to Trump, that had nothing to do with it. Now, he was going forward with the plea deal. So what happened to it? How did it get off track? All of a sudden, the crazy Republicans called upon him to say, how could you do this? It's a bad deal. You're wrong. You shouldn't have done that. And then after that, he says, well, I have an ongoing investigation. Now, you've probably seen enough shows and heard enough experts talk about how a plea bargain works. And it's like any other negotiation. I have these 4 or 5 offenses. I'll plead to 2 of them. You'll dismiss the others. Okay? So, in this case, I think the prosecutor only had what was the subject of the agreement. None of it was criminal. But Hunter Biden, by advice of counsel, was ready to get rid of it. And so, he pleaded guilty. Then, when it comes time for sentencing, instead of the agreed sentence, we have this ballet in which they say, well, you, Mr. Prosecutor, you said you have an ongoing investigation. Now, when you make a deal, you do not leave it open to some ongoing investigation. You make a deal that applies to all the alleged bad acts that are the concern of the prosecution, and you, the subject or target of the investigation. So, what would I do if I was in Hunter Biden's counsel's position? I think it may be pretty close to what he'll do, because I've been impressed with how he's handled the matter. He didn't mince words with the government. He said we had a deal. Now, I hate to reference Cosby, but his conviction went away in part because he had an agreement with the prosecutor's office and they ignored it. I believe that's a motion I would make in this case. You made that motion. Who was in touch with you? And did you change it because of political pressure? Now, as for Garland, he should have asked these questions before making him a special counsel. Why do you need this? What is it for? What was your investigation about? What happened to that plea deal? And don't tell me it's Hunter Biden's fault. It's yours. You made a deal and you ran away from it. What's the second thing? The second thing is because of the nature of the charges, there is a provision in the Constitution and a constitutional law in criminal cases to cause selective prosecutions to be dismissed. Now, some may say, is that what happened to Trump? No, that's not what happened to Trump. Trump's a very different case. And, you know, people may run around politically and say, oh, no, it's not, it's the same thing, but it's not. And so I think there's also cause for a charge that this is a selective prosecution. Now, what about trying it? Well, if you're trying it, I'd dig right into it. And does the prosecution think he's going to use the plea against him that was part of the deal to make the case? I don't think that's right. That's a fight. So I think a good lawyer in this case, and I believe Hunter Biden has a good lawyer who's experienced and he has a client who's attentive and can be helpful in giving details and information that helps them defend against this case. But I think it is possible that the scenario here is to keep this alive by the Republicans that encourage Weiss to continue in the case and to look for equal status as a special counsel, because it's all the Republicans have. And so they're hoping they'll get a point or two against the man who has nothing to do with any of this investigation, that is President Joe Biden. So, two instances important in the landscape of ongoing frustration to have corridors of justice that are our guiding path back to a republic endangered by Trump, endangered by Republicans in the House and the Senate. And more I'm confident that we have the moxie to make the damn thing work. So that's what I have to say from my Cathedral of Trees, and I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.